It was supposed to stop incontinence and treat pelvic organ prolapse, but thousands of women have been left permanently injured from complications from vaginal mesh. In the UK, victims are calling for financial redress, and around the world, 100,000 women are suing the manufacturers of vaginal mesh. I'm journalist Angela Walker, and in this podcast I talk to inspirational people and discuss underreported issues. My guest today is Kath Sampson from the campaign group Sling the Mesh.
She also has a stoma bag. She had to have her bladder removed. That's quite an extreme story. Many women on there where the mesh is slicing clean through their vaginal walls, so they can't have sex with their husbands anymore because it injures their husbands.
Thank you so much for joining me, Kath.
Hi, thank you for having me on your show.
So we're going to talk about calls for financial redress for women in the UK who've been damaged by vaginal mesh and where that process is in the UK compared with, the rest of the world. But first though, can you share your experience with us? When did you first have an operation to insert pelvic mesh and what was it for, Kath?
So it was back in 2015. My girls were teenagers, and I found that over the years since becoming a mum, if I did like 3 sneezes in a row, I'd sometimes have a bit of a bladder leak. Jumping on the trampoline was out. I'm sure a lot of mums will recognise that. But I found that as I sort of got into my mid-40s, that got a little bit worse, and then I took up boxing as a sport to keep fit, and I found that when I was boxing, in particular doing like the uppercuts, I think that put quite a lot of pressure on my bladder, and I was getting like leaks in my training classes, and I just found it really embarrassing. It was predominantly male boxing class, and so I went to my GP and asked, is there anything that I can do to help this? And he referred me to the local hospital, where they told me about this really simple day case, gold standard surgery, in and out in a day, back at your desk, 3 or 4 days, maximum a week, you'll be absolutely fine. And I wasn't told of any risks. I was actually asked, had I done any pelvic floor physio? And I said I hadn't. And he told me, well, physiotherapy doesn't work anyway, which I've later found out to not be the case. And I very much, that consultation process made me feel like it was a little bit like having a coil fitted. It felt that simple.
So when did you start getting complications from the mesh?
So it was instant. So I came out of that surgery struggling to walk, but I just put it down to I'd had surgery, and I didn't sort of think anything of it. And the next day I was still in a terrible amount of pain in my groin, pelvis, hips, but in particular down my legs and in my feet. And it was a struggle to walk. By day 3, it was getting worse. And a week down the line, when, I was told I'd be back at my desk, no worries, I started to really panic because the pain was so extreme. I'd never felt anything like it. And I was lying awake at night, not just in pain, but with the regret of what on earth have I done? And that was the point at which I Googled TVT, which was the operation I had for stress incontinence. And that's when I started seeing stories come up about women in Scotland who are campaigning. And I just stumbled on a blog written by a woman from Oxford who'd exactly the same as me, really, really fit, had the surgery to help her leaks, and had come out and was struggling to walk. And I read it, and my chin hit the floor, because I thought, Liz's story is my story. I'm now in this position where I didn't even know it was a piece of plastic mesh being put in me. I didn't know long-term complications. And there was part of me, and this is really common on the page, there was part of me that felt a fool for not researching it. And there was a bigger part of me that was just terrified of, is this my life now? And so in that moment, I decided to set up a campaign. I didn't know how I was going to do it, what I was going to do, but I started the legwork of the campaign within 2 weeks of my surgery to raise awareness. And in fact, Liz, who wrote that blog, she put me in touch with about 20 women who joined the campaign back in 2015. And today, in 2024, we've got more than 10,400 on the page from around the world.
Over 10,000 women. So presumably you went back to the doctor and said, I've got these problems. Talk us through what happened when you complained about the problems you were having.
Yeah, so I had a phone call with this lady called Liz who'd written the blog, and she warned me that when I went back to my surgeon, I'd be very much made to feel like I was a mystery patient. The complications would be downplayed, and I would be made to feel as if this was all in my head. And I was shocked. I worked as a journalist at the time at the local newspaper, and you hear some pretty terrible stories, as you'll know, as a journalist. And I thought, no, they won't do that. He won't lie. He'll take it seriously, and he'll help me. Surely this is what is going to happen. And sure as I'd been warned, I went along to this consultation, and there was the surgeon with two nurses, and it was almost like this amateur dramatic stage scene within the consultation room, where I told them about my pain, and the doctor took a sharp intake of breath and looked at the nurses and said, have you ever heard of complications? And they were, no, doctor, we have not. Oh, how so? You must be the only one. You've been very unlucky. And it was so staged. And because I'd been warned about it, I was horrified and also really angry that you're making me out to be a little bit crazy, that I'm suffering these complications and I'm the only one. And yet I know there's others. I've already been linked up with 20 others at this point, and I could see there were more. And at that point, I asked, could I be referred to a surgeon who was known at that time to do mesh removal? And the surgeon admitted he knew about her. So he obviously knew of mesh complications. And I got my referral, and I sat and waited to have a mesh removal. But in that moment, I realised, if you're prepared to gaslight me and downplay what I'm going through and treat me as a mystery patient, I'm not the only one. He knew I was a journalist at the local newspaper. What are you going to be doing to, for example, a woman in her 80s with no IT skills who can't get on the internet to find out things? And so that's when I set up the campaign. What was awful was that pain was so searing and felt just brutal. It upset me knowing that there were other women out there suffering and just having to put up because no one was taking them seriously. And I knew there was some real work to do to get this story out in the media and to get politicians to take notice and to get something done about it.
And of course, when we go to the doctors, when we deal with health professionals, we defer to them and their expertise and we trust them, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's a real recurring narrative on the page of shattered trust amongst women and men. We have male members who've had hernia mesh, and our trust is so broken from this experience. I'm not unique. I would say 9 out of 10 on the page have had that same experience as me, where you've gone back to your surgeon and you've been, institutional denial that this mesh surgery has caused so many problems. And at the time, the pain was so bad. I worked as a journalist, but I also ran my own successful photography business. I've been doing it for over 15 years at that point. And I'd had a wedding planned for 3 weeks' time, and I couldn't cancel. How can you cancel on a bride? I had to rush around finding another photographer to do that wedding for me. But in that moment, I knew that was the end of my photography business. And that was it.
Because it's very physical being a photographer, isn't it? I guess it stands to reason, there's always going to be a certain number of complications with any medical procedure. But why can't people who've had this mesh implanted, who've got problems, why isn't it as simple as just being able to have it removed, Kath?
So when the mesh goes in, within a couple of weeks, tissues and nerves have started growing through like the mesh weave. So it becomes almost embedded, if you like. It's complex and quite dangerous surgery to go in and try and remove it. It's not easy. It takes a highly skilled surgeon to even attempt it. So finding a surgeon that will do it, that can do it, is really difficult. And although we have specialist mesh centres now set up, thanks to the First Do No Harm report, the waiting lists are outrageous, 2, 3, 4 years. Some women are finding that they thought they had a full removal and it hasn't. It's only partly been taken out. Essentially, mesh was designed to go in and be permanent. It was never designed to be removed. So I think the horrible thing about the whole mesh scandal story is, we really need to have medical devices that have been better regulated, better tested. We shouldn't be putting something in humans that can't be removed if it causes problems like this.
So talk us through the effect the injuries have had on your everyday life and what's your situation now? Have you had the mesh removed? How's your body now?
So the effect the mesh had on me, instantly, within 2 days, my nose started dripping as like a kind of inflammatory response reaction. And despite mesh removal, at 9 years later, I still have that. My nose drips constantly. That's a minor complication compared to the pain down my legs. That did ease a little from removal, but I find I can't run anymore. I can't do any impact exercise because it just leaves me in a lot of pain in my legs. I can't cycle anymore. I used to have 2 bikes. I'd go like mountain biking. I was training to cycle up Snowdon. That's how stupidly fit I was, and I can't even cycle up town anymore. That's a hobby gone. I found there was a lot of vaginal pain that went after removal, thank goodness. So I would say, despite having a mesh removal, I, like everyone on the page, we have to get used to a new normal. Now, my new normal is really good, despite being quite bad, probably to anyone listening, but it's really good compared to some of the women on the page who 1 in 4 of them need some kind of mobility aid, like a stick, a mobility scooter or a wheelchair. 7 in 10 have lost their sex lives because of the pain in their vaginas that never resolves after removal. A lot of them struggle to walk, struggle to sit, struggle to travel on public transport. A lot of them have had to give up work. I feel lucky that I can actually work. A lot of us have chronic fatigue, myself included, so I have to manage my time so I can build in like naps and rest in between activities. So I've gone from being this really super fit woman to having my health and my hobbies compromised. A lot of us have IBS. I have that. I have a lot of food allergies now and intolerances. It sets up a whole like system of reactions of pain, but also almost like a systemic illnesses like your food intolerances, rashes, all that kind of thing. It's really hard to get across how badly people have been affected. But I would say people have gone in for a surgery they trusted and they've had the rug pulled out from under their feet and their lives have been ruined.
It's interesting you say that. I'm just going to read you from this long-term study by the National Library of Medicine, and it says mesh surgery was associated with poor mental and sexual health outcomes and increased opioid and antibiotic use in women with no history of these outcomes.
It doesn't surprise me to know the level of suffering. More than 50% of women on our page have recurring urinary tract infections, and over 10% of those are becoming antibiotic resistant. So we have women that are becoming at risk of sepsis because antibiotics are no longer working for them. We believe that like a biofilm creates around this plastic mesh, and then bacteria almost get stuck. So despite taking antibiotics, you can't get rid of these UTIs. So there's women going back and forth to their GPs and ending up in A&E for some serious UTIs. So that doesn't surprise me. The opioid use, women are trying everything to get rid of pain. So they're not addicted to painkillers. Let me say it a different way. They're desperately trying to find a way to get rid of their pain because it's awful. There's some women, they can't even find a way to sit comfortably or lie comfortably. We do have some women that they can barely get out of bed because they can hardly move, or the pain. And these are women, with women on the page, they had the surgery because they were preparing to run a London marathon and had embarrassing bladder leaks. Had this surgery, they've never run again. They can hardly walk again. It's devastating. We have men with hernia mesh where the mesh has eroded, which means like cut, if you like, into their spermatic cord. So you imagine not only the pain, but they're probably not going to be able to have children, not naturally anyway. Women where the mesh has sliced clean through vaginal walls, causing terrible pain for them, but also making sex impossible. We've women who the mesh have sliced into their bowels and their bladders, and they've had to have organs removed, and they've now got stoma bags. And these are all people that trusted their doctor that they were having a simple fix for incontinence or prolapse. Yeah.
Now, I know at the beginning of this conversation, you said you felt gaslighted by the doctor when you went back initially. We're a few years on from that. What's your response been with the authorities now? Because you, along with all these other women, are quite rightly seeking financial redress. Where's that at? What's going on with the authorities?
So in terms of the gaslighting, that is still going on, sadly, and might I say, it is quite a common experience of anyone who's been harmed from a healthcare treatment, not just mesh. You go back and you face this wall of institutional denial. That's really common. But in terms of mesh, financial redress, we had the first Do No Harm report by Baroness Cumberledge, which was groundbreaking because that recognised not just the suffering caused to women, but also how our voices were not listened to, and many for years. It recognised that whole scale of gaslighting and a lot of misogyny within that. So it's meant that the authorities have had to sit up and take notice, because that's been a really groundbreaking and damning report, in fact, of the healthcare sector. So where we're at now is one of the 9 key recommendations of the Cumberledge First Do No Harm report is that women get financial redress. And what that means is that a system is set up whereby payments are made to women where they don't have to fight in the courts. It's just given to them in lieu of everything they've lost: their health, their hobbies, their mental health and well-being, their businesses, their jobs, their pensions. You know, we shouldn't have to fight through the courts in an adversarial system. It should just be given, and that's why it's called financial redress. A report called the Hughes Report by the Patient Safety Commissioner came out in February of this year, and that's recommended that redress is given and starts as early as 2025. But we're just waiting for the government to come back on their decision on that now.
Yeah, the Patient Safety Commissioner for England said that people who've been harmed by pelvic mesh should receive an interim award of £25,000. That was Henrietta Hughes, who's a practicing GP, and she said thousands of women have been harmed, and it's a crucial step towards acknowledging the challenges faced by families impacted. Has the government responded to that call for redress for this initial payment of £25,000?
Nope, not yet. And when the first Do No Harm report was first published in 2020, the government made it clear they didn't really want to go down this route. They certainly weren't going to set up a special person to sort of deal with this, if you like. And I think the pressure has been put on continuously by Baroness Cumberledge and other politicians. We've had the appointment of Henrietta Hughes, which has been incredible. She's been able to put more pressure on. But essentially, no. We're still waiting for an answer.
Henrietta Hughes, who is the Patient Safety Commissioner, said, "If the government does not accept my recommendations, it would be a cruel and callous disregard for the many vulnerable people who have suffered through no fault of their own. The government will be signalling they do not care."
100%. It's strong words, and they're strong words that need saying.
I did contact the Department of Health press office twice. They've just ignored my contact completely. So I did give them a right to reply, but they weren't interested. So talk to me about the Sunshine Payment Act, because that's something that you've been calling for, isn't it?
That is, from pretty much the early days of my campaign, I found out about something called the Sunshine Payment Act. Now, they have it in America, and they also have a version of it in Denmark, France, Belgium. And what it is, it's a law that forces the industry, so the makers of drugs and medical devices, to log all of the money it gives to doctors, researchers, healthcare charities, royal colleges, teaching hospitals, parliamentary groups. You know, there's a lot of money being sprayed around the healthcare sector to essentially, they're not doing it because they're a philanthropic interest. They're doing it because it helps promote their treatments. It might help get a treatment approved faster. You might get a doctor who's on the television that might talk about their treatment because they've been invited to a training course in America and it's on their radar, and money given to train surgeons in perhaps a new product. We know this happened in mesh, that training sessions were paid for by the manufacturers of the mesh. And what that does is it adds bias into prescribing and treatment options. It adds bias into the scientific literature, and it makes me and many others question research integrity. So when I started looking at the scientific literature around mesh, I could see that there was so much studies out there that were all promoting it as gold standard treatment. But if it was written by an American author, I could go to the American database and find if that author had taken money from industry, and a lot of times they had. So I really want to see this for the UK, so that when new scientific literature comes out or a new healthcare treatment come out, we can have a look. Well, actually, who's written this? Who's promoting it? Go to the open public database, type in their name, and it can come up, that has how much money that person has taken. So in America, for example, there's a particular gynecologist who's a really well-known key opinion leader, and you type his name in, he's taken more than 1.6 million in the last, I think it's 6 years. That's a lot of money, right?
That's quite a big sweetener, isn't it?
It is a big sweetener.
It's a big sweetener, and I think if you're being given £1 million, some might argue that it's easier to turn a blind eye to the failings of a certain product than if you haven't been given £1 million. And perhaps the public does have a right to know about these things.
100%. And we have strong suspicions of various names, if you like, within the gynecology sector who've probably taken payments from industry, but we have no way of proving it, and you can't say it, otherwise that's defamation, right? So the only proof we have is there was a Scottish surgeon who took £100,000 from the makers of a particular mesh that he was trialling. So that was taken for research purposes. Now, in his trial, he came out with a really glowing report. This mesh is really safe. It doesn't cause any thigh pain. Crack on, it's great. So, but based on that and other scientific literature, but this particular report was used to help promote mesh as gold standard. Now, this particular mesh sling is the worst one that has put our women into wheelchairs and on walking sticks and mobility scooters. It's a particular method of insertion that has really caused thigh pain. And yet his paper said it didn't cause thigh pain. And now the only reason we know about that payment is somebody whistle blew on him 8 years later after the paper was published. So we need these payments to not sit under the radar. We need them to be in the public domain as soon as scientific literature is out, so we can have an informed debate on the impact of conflicts of interest of industry payments.
So while we're talking about money, let's get back to this idea of financial redress. I mean, where are you at with that now? Because, you've been in pain for a long time. You've been campaigning for a long time. There are thousands of women in the UK who have suffered from this pelvic mesh, and it's acknowledged that's why they're suffering. So what reasons are you being given for delays in this money?
Well, we haven't had a reason. We've got to wait for the government to respond. And I understand we're approaching a general election. We all know that. It's testing times, but even more testing for mesh-injured women who've lost so much. And, we need a commitment from the government that these payments are going to be forthcoming. I look at the infected blood scandal. Those poor people have had to wait 4 decades. It's outrageous. People have had their lives, they're innocent people who've had their lives ruined. Same as the mesh-injured women. They innocently trusted this procedure and have lost so much. We must not be left to wait.
I've reported on the infected blood scandal many, many times in my career, and so many of those people that were affected have died before they've received any kind of financial redress or compensation.
That's how the mesh-injured women feel.
That's still rolling on now as well, still waiting. You talked about gaslighting from the medical community. Do you think politicians are taking this seriously enough?
They are now. So back in 2015, when the campaign first began, there was some, when I say hesitance to set up an all-party parliamentary group, I think it was, they could see it was a problem, but they thought it was only a small number of people. And it was only I kept sending out press releases and calling in favours from journalist mates, if you like, to come on, we need to keep telling these women's stories. We need to get it out there and keep telling it from different angles so that the politicians realise how bad it was. And so back in 2016-17, that all-party parliamentary group was set up. And thanks to that, other politicians were realising that actually, yes, this is serious. I think if politicians have a constituent suffering, yes, they know how serious it is. I think the government are still not taking it seriously in terms of the financial impact and giving redress.
Sure. And it was in the headlines a couple of years ago. And then, it just sort of almost seemed to go away. But of course,
Yeah.
behind the scenes, thousands of women like yourself are still suffering.
Yeah, 100%. I think the first Do No Harm report came out, and a lot of people just assumed, oh, everything's fixed now. And of course, it isn't fixed, because we've only really scratched the tip of the iceberg, with new members joining all the time. And the story carries on for those people who've been harmed.
And tell us about some of the most extreme injuries that people are still suffering from.
One lady springs to mind who's had 8 A&E admissions in the last 18 months for sepsis, because she was told her mesh was removed, and actually she's since found out, I think, only 2 centimetres of it removed. So there's still this piece of plastic with all the toxins leaching within her system, which is causing dreadful UTIs. So she's sepsis risk. She also has a stoma bag. She had to have her bladder removed. That's quite an extreme story. There's many women on there where the mesh is slicing clean through their vaginal walls, so they can't have sex with their husbands anymore because it injures their husbands. I'm sorry if that's a dreadful story to tell, but that's really common on the page. Women who need mobility scooters to get around because their legs shake from all the nerve damage, where they just can't walk anymore. We have women on the page who are suicidal, and that's the one that really upsets me, that these were women with great lives, jobs, vibrant careers, all ripped away from them, and some just don't want to be here anymore. And we have had suicides of members, not just in the UK, but from around the world, because they just don't want to be here anymore. And that's heartbreaking.
Of course, the mental health toll of any kind of illness or disability is hard to bear anyway. But of course, when it's something that is avoidable, that could have been avoided, it's understandable the negative effect that it's having on people. And not being able to have sex is a terrible thing. What effect is that having on people's marriages?
Oh, appalling. When I first began the campaign, it was something that women didn't really want to talk about because they felt embarrassed that they were grieving the loss of their sex life. And I would say to them, if this was men losing their sex life, well, A, people would be sympathetic and supportive, but B, this operation would have been stopped years ago. But there's always this narrative of guilt among women that they shouldn't, or they feel guilty that they want a sex life even. So first of all, there's that guilt. And then there's this sadness or something that's lost that they used to share with their partner. And then sadly, we do have many women on the page whose husbands are cheating or they've left them, marriages are breaking down. And, that's another smack in the face of appalling and devastating complications that women are having to go through from this simple day case surgery.
How do you feel about this situation?
Hang on.
I'm sorry to see you so upset. This has devastated your life, hasn't it?
I think, do you know what? Oh my gosh, sometimes it just hits, You oversee a group of people who are struggling so much physically. Oh dear goodness, sorry, mentally and emotionally. And what is really hard is I can't fix this, I can't fix their lives. I can't fix what's been done to them. The emotional toll it's took on me and all of the admins is huge. Well, you can see from the tears, can't you? It's taken a huge toll on me because it's painful, really painful watching people struggle and knowing that actually there's this huge patient safety scandal that has created massive profits for industry and industry shareholders. And at the end of it, there's innocent people in their homes with ruined lives, and it feels like nobody cares. That's really hard. Oh, sorry, I'm quite embarrassed when I cry.
No, not at all, because you've really been through and you are still going through something which is so traumatic, and it wasn't your fault. And, you're working so hard to help people and to bring justice. I know lots of women, 10,000 women, are already in regular touch with you, but what about if there are people listening who've had vaginal mesh and they've got problems, or men who've had mesh for hernias? How can they get in touch with you if they want to join you in your campaign and they want some help and advice?
Yeah, well, I would say look out for the Facebook support group. We're also on Instagram, Twitter. We have a Sling the Mesh website with lots of information on. It's not just like hernia mesh and pelvic mesh. There are also men's mesh slings. So that's men who've had prostate cancer and suffer bladder leaks. They've been offered mesh slings. There may well be men out there suffering, but they wouldn't know to come to a women's health campaign maybe. So if that sounds like you, or if you know someone with prostate cancer who's been offered a surgery, a simple quick fix, please let them know and come to the page for information. There are also women who've had breast cancer. There's certain types of mastectomy repairs that might involve surgical mesh implants. So come to the page, there's lots of information, go to the website, check it out, and try and do your research and be informed and ask questions.
Kath, Sampson, thank you so much for talking to me today. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Angela Walker in Conversation. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Don't forget to follow and subscribe, and please do share, rate and review the podcast, because that means the algorithm will show it to more people like you who are interested in these kind of stories. You can find more information on my website, angelawalkerreports.com, and plenty more podcasts along these lines talking about human interest issues. Take care. Till next time. Goodbye.